Hello, world. Welcome, welcome. I think we're live, Kwesi.
Hey everyone, how you doing?
Uh, Again, welcome, everyone. This is the Culture Clinic show where we help people leaders shape great workplace culture so that your people love where they work. My name is Joe. I am the co-founder at Gusto. I have personally been working closely with HR professionals for over 10 years, working with them to help build great culture through recognition programs. And here with my esteemed colleague, Kwesi Thomas. Do you want to say a quick hello and tell the team and the viewers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. I am Kwesi Thomas. I have been in HR for a little over 20 years now, and spent a lot of that time in rewards and recognition and culture, and then also in other parts. But hoping to answer some questions and help some people out where I can.
Kwesi's super modest. He's got a crazy, amazing career working at ridiculously awesome companies and helping them become ridiculously awesome. So he is a wealth of knowledge. And yeah, just if you do have questions, this isn't an ask us anything format, and so put your questions in the chat for Kwesi. We do have a topic today to kind of kick things off, but you're welcome to ask questions, anything related to people and culture, total rewards, recognition best practices. But again, to kick things off, the topic will be the truth about recognition points programs. Before we jump in, just a quick note. There has been some technical issues with LinkedIn from time to time. We've heard that it can act a little bit funky. So if you are having any streaming issues with LinkedIn, you can also watch live at YouTube, and we can post up the link in the chat. So team, post it up. That'd be helpful. But with that, let's get the wheels turning. What do you think, Quace?
Sure. Let's go.
Cool. Okay, so just to kick things off, I think it'd be helpful to just sort of like set the stage for what is a recognition points program. Do you want to kind of like touch on that before we go a little bit deeper?
Sure. I mean, the good thing, I think most of us have had some interaction with points programs, whether it's credit card or a gas miles program or whatever else. You've seen some of the points programs. What we say a recognition points program, really it's for the trigger is some sort of recognition worthy activity at work that triggers this event where someone's recognizing you, and typically you're receiving points for that activity. And they've been used for everything from doing more at work to stop smoking to you name it, right? But these programs have, really got popular during an early part of my career when I was at BlackBerry, probably a little bit earlier than that actually. And we were doing points programs that were really involving, some sort of activity that we wanted you to do at work, and then giving you points for doing that activity.
Yeah. So the idea here is like, hey, let's reinforce behaviors by providing points, and then people can accrue these points and then eventually redeem points for different rewards
For stuff.
And then, just to kind of like add on that, I would say that these really came into vogue about 15 years ago. And the idea was that it was sort of an improvement over a lot of the really old school recognition programs that were providing things like plaques and pins and certificates. So that was sort of a step forward versus the ancient world that, was plaques, pins, and certificates. But a lot has changed in the last 15 years. And we do consistently hear from employees and employers that it may not be delivering, like points programs may not be delivering the impact or value that they hope. So I'm sure we can kind of like, we're going to get into that as we kind of go along. And we've got a few questions that we're going to tackle. So we can kind of like unpack that a little bit. Quace, do we still have you here? All right, there we go. Okay, first question, Kwesi, is from Tasha. Can you hear me okay? Not sure if it's me or Kwesi, but maybe our team can chime in the chat and let us know if there's any technical issues on either side. Kwesi, can you hear me okay? Okay, so y'all can hear me, and Quace is breaking up. So we're gonna keep this rolling, Quace. Maybe what you want to do is sign off and sign on, and then I can keep the party started or keep the party going here. So first question came in from Tasha. Question: I've heard that points programs are no longer the gold standard in recognition. Why is that? I think we got
Joe,
you
am I
back.
back or
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
back?
Just in time for question one. Okay, you ready?
Excellent.
Cool.
Sure.
This is in Tasha. I've heard that points programs are no longer the gold standard in recognition. Why is that?
Sorry, threw off by the technical issues, but why are they not the gold standard anymore? And that's has a lot to do with how the programs are built, right? And so a lot of these points programs are built on, accumulating a number of points over a period of time, and then redeeming them for some sort of activity. And so that creates a couple of problems. What are the points worth? How do you redeem them? What is in the catalog? What's in the catalog that you can redeem them for? What is the cost of that redemption? How does it get to you? It created a lot of problems, not so much in the recognizing part of the activity, but in the rewarding part of the activity. And as we all know, we kind of want to make this seamless and good for the employee and actually make it as close to timely as possible. And so a lot of these programs had these drag-on effects where the points, once you got, you got to thank you, but once you got to the points part, you kind of get lost in all the confusion of what is this worth? What can I use it for? How do I get more of them so I can actually get to the microwave that I want in the catalog, or to the vacation in the catalog, whatever it is. And so you go down those paths, and it becomes really a challenge just to, understand what these points are valued at. And so that really took away from the recognition activity.
So sort of like this lack of transparency around what the value of those points were. Is that sort of like, if I'm translating a little bit, like, would you say that that's one of the problems with points programs? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. If I were to, don't make it complicated, it's definitely the lack of transparency. But there's definitely complicated, especially if you administer a program like this. There are all sorts of other challenges that you get into the points because, but yes, the main one is transparency.
Yeah, and from my lens, we've worked a lot with a lot of companies that have experimented with points, have worked in points programs. Points can have an impact in some industries. Like if you are at a company where everyone is at a computer all day, a points program can work. What we do see, where we see points really, really struggle is in frontline and deskless industries, right? So when you think about a company where someone is not sitting at a computer all day, maybe they don't have a company phone, maybe they don't even have a company email address. How are you actually rewarding those people, right? Like it's really, really hard to print points. So if someone goes above and beyond and they're not at a computer, what is the act that you're taking to ensure that that person is being rewarded? And so this is, in large part why it's very challenging to run points programs in those frontline industries. And then I think you touched on a good one. We hear it all the time, right? Like the confusion around points can be a big problem. If someone gets 100 points or 200 points and they don't really know what that gets them, it sort of devalues the act a little bit, right? Like, what does this mean? Right? And then what about your lens in terms of sort of what's working in recognition programs? Like, what do you think is creating the most engagement in programs right now? Like what's working the most or the best? Sorry.
To me, if you can make the reward, so I'm just going to stick on the points part of the program for a second, not the recognition portion, but on where the points really come to play. If you can, in that conversation or in that recognition act where you're saying, hey, thank you for doing XYZ, or we appreciate the XYZ you've done. If you can kind of take it all and make it all happen in that one interaction where here is the recognition, here is the reward. I know what it is. I know how I can get it, and make that happen as seamlessly as possible. So you're not dragging this out over time. That's to me, it's the gold standard, right? And some of these programs now where you can do all the recognition and the rewarding in the same platform and have that activity kind of happen at once, where there aren't 20 clicks and 4 logins and whatever else happens. I think that's the gold standard in terms of how these programs are working best. I also see a lot of progress in terms of the rewards, and the size of the rewards are now starting to make sense. Early in these programs, you were giving out 100 points knowing that the person had to get like 400 points before there's anything really interesting for them to get rewarded for. Because the idea then was that, hey, you got to keep doing a bunch of activity, and the more we got you to do, the more you can get to actually something you want. And so I really like it in the current programs, we've kind of taken that away. That activity that got rewarded probably has a recognition or award that's available to you that is actually happy or you're interested in getting. And so I think that change in the programs in the last few years has been really good for recognition.
Yeah, there's sort of a theme actually when we speak to HR leaders who have run points programs. You kind of touched on it, and that is that within points programs, employees often feel like they need to save a lot of points for a very long time to get a reward that may not, have a lot of meaning. And so it's
Right.
like, what's the point here? And so what we're actually seeing as being very successful right now, I know that a lot of people see peer-to-peer as sort of like let's get to peer-to-peer because is what's going to create the most impact. And in many cases, that's true. But sticking with sort of this theme around frontline and deskless, if you are a frontline industry company, peer-to-peer may not be your pony, especially out of the gate. And so a lot of companies see a tremendous amount of success running really robust top-down rewards and recognition programs with meaningful budgets attached.
Yeah.
And then if that's working, they can start thinking about a peer-to-peer program. And I would actually argue, and a lot of our clients would argue, that a non-monetary peer-to-peer program can actually be more impactful than a monetary peer-to-peer program if you're not ready to invest a significant budget into that peer-to-peer program. And I'd love your comment on this. Just one last bit to this. What we often see is companies put such a small budget towards their peer-to-peer program that it's like everyone gets a couple bucks a month to reward each other. And then they're out of their points, so they're out of their budget, and then recognition is sort of stifled. So rather than that, let people just give each other shout outs that are non-monetary. And then you can think about ways to reward the people that are most engaged in that non-monetary program. Any thoughts on that?
Joe, I should probably take it a step further. I very rarely have seen a company that's actually ready for peer-to-peer. And that's probably because the budgets are never like, whereas I think you probably see the same thing. That's 1% of payroll, maybe sometimes 2%. And by the time you give that to the leaders to reward people, I'd rather get a really healthy program for leaders going than to jump into peer-to-peer, right? And I say that, this is part of my own bleeding with recognition. It's one of the few tools on the tool belt the manager has to use daily when they're recognizing people. So give them a tool they can actually use before we create another, peanut buttered program with peer-to-peer. So I agree with you completely. And I think with points, I think that just got a little bit even more diluted. You couldn't see the points. And you touched on it. I just want to throw it out there. If you've been doing recognition for a while, before, gift cards and other programs that are now, we used to be redeeming for a thing. And so even though I got $100 in points then converted to $100, I then have to pay for the shipping and for the company's margin and all this other stuff out of those points. So I would have got a $60 thing for my $100 points. And I think, the more we can bolster our leader programs right now with good budgets and that are actually where the dollars get to the employees, then I think we're building the right type of programs.
Yeah, totally. And, I want to make sure that any listeners don't get me wrong or don't get you wrong. I think that there is definitely a place for peer-to-peer. It's massively impactful. But I think, and just correct me if I'm wrong here, Quace, what you're saying is like, let's make sure we get the top-down program going first, that the leaders and managers are sort of like walking the walk, building the habit around recognition before we move into peer-to-peer.
Yeah. And I think for me, maybe it's wrong of me to make that assumption. The reality is I've very rarely seen a company that's put the budget and the resources behind fully doing a leadership program where they're ready to do a funded peer-to-peer program. I think I've seen one that I can think of, and they actually used their peer-to-peer, wasn't peer-to-peer. You could actually just increase the person's manager like recognition by adding on to it, like being like, yeah, I agree, and putting more in that recognition. But
right.
Yeah.
And then to button this up, I mean, I do think that there are industries where peer-to-peer may not work. And so rather than trying to push the boulder up the hill, so frontline, again, don't have a computer, don't have a phone, may not have a company email address, that peer-to-peer may never be your thing. So rather than trying to spread yourself so thin, just double down on the top-down program. It's my opinion based on the clients that we see as being successful. So
yeah.
Okay, so let's take this step further. I kind of have a thought and a question. Like, all this said, like, do you think points are meaningful to employees? And then would you consider points to be an instant reward?
No. You don't know what the point's worth. Like unless you're out there saying, hey, I'm giving you 100 points and they're worth 20 cents each point, you're giving someone a reward that they then have to then back calculate or infer the value of what they've received, right? And so I think it actually it gets really lost, right? I've given you the shout out, thank you for doing whatever you've done, and I've given you this reward that you have no way of valuing, other than maybe in the catalog, kind of assuming, hey, it's probably worth this much because I can get this thing. And so I feel like that devalues whether they're worth much, right?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I mean, look, if your points program has a really low conversion, someone goes above and beyond and they get 200 points, and that 200 points is like a true value of 75 cents. I don't know, just getting 75 cents for going above and beyond, is that meaningful?
Yeah,
I don't think so. Okay, we actually have a question that came in through the chat, Quace. Maybe we'll tackle that. This came in from Michael. How do you handle residual points? So points left over if the program that rewards points is for a limited time.
Yeah, this is a program design question. I mean, I'm assuming, Michael, you've probably already had where the program is now. You've probably already decided what the rewards could be redeemed for, right? Because if you've got residual points, means they could have gotten 100 points and had options that gave them 80 points, 70 points, whatever it is, and they got left over with these 20, 10, whatever points left in their account. If you can design that out from the start, great. So that there is no option, and especially with the time blocked program, it's a short-term program. Try to line it so that there is no ability to sort of have those residual points that cannot be used for anything. I have seen programs have to cash out those points and move them into payroll, and it just gets very messy because at that point you're now converting them to real dollars and taxing them, and now those points, which are not worth much in the first place, are now being paid out. The other option, you don't see it often, is to pool it. Like, pull those points that are left over and do something good with it. Like, pull it towards something that the company's doing, whether it's a charity or something else, potluck, whatever it is. But you can pool those points, especially if you're talking about $1 here, $2 there, $4 there. If you're talking about hundreds of dollars in people's account that they can't use, I'm sure you can find a way to take those out of the program in a more reasonable way. Have I answered your question or made it completely confusing? Hopefully that made sense. So I'll recap. One, try to design it out from the start so that the program, if it's short term, you have to use up your points because the program's going to end. And two, if you haven't done that, you've got residual points in. If you can take those points, if they're assuming that they are relatively small, and move them out to something larger that the employee base or the team will be happy to see, great. And if you're worst case scenario, moving them out to pay out, but hopefully you don't have to do that because nobody wants to do that, and payroll will not be happy with you.
Awesome. Cool. Thanks. Thanks, Grace. Sounds like that was helpful. All right, let's keep rolling along here. We've only got about 10 minutes left. We've got a few questions on the board. So this one's in from Marcella, little off the theme, but this isn't asking me anything. So appreciate the question regardless here, Marcella. So Quace, this one's for you. Do you have any corporate charity ideas for an office, i.e. ways our employees can work together or partner with a charity? Our social committee has a mandate to introduce charity that we can work or partner with. This is new, and we'd like to get involved as an office working together. And then just for context, they have offices in Toronto, BC, UK, and Malta. So if we can do something globally, that'd be great.
Okay.
You want me to repeat it all? Like I'll try and consolidate as well.
No. I'm trying to figure out. I want to give an answer that's actually helpful and not too generic, but I want to answer some of the generic parts of what you've said as well. So I'll answer with the generic part first. Number one for me, especially when you have global offices like having the Toronto, BC, UK, Malta, etc. I would try, if you can, especially when it comes to charity or charitable activity, to try to set up one global theme, thought, goal, that aligns with your corporate and your culture goals, right? So something that makes sense for the culture you're trying to build. But with this particular topic, I'd probably let the local offices or the local groups express that in a way that makes sense for their cities that they are living in and the surroundings that they're in, right? And so I don't necessarily think you need to force it to be too global in nature, but you should be global in that it has to somehow reinforce the culture and the values that you're trying to build, if that makes sense. That's probably the first part. Second part, now that we're sort of seeing this remote world since post-COVID, I do think doing these activities that actually bring people together in real life for something like taking part in soup kitchens and other things that happen. I think this is a really good way of still bringing people together that don't necessarily come into the office on a frequent basis, and they don't cross paths. And so definitely, I would encourage you to do that. 1 second. I mentioned already, and this is my last global piece of it. Tie it back to your culture. Please don't do something random. Don't. For example, don't decide to make bikes if you have that's not tied to any part of your culture in any way, and you can't draw a straight line to it. If you draw a zigzag line to bikes, that's up to you guys. But if you draw a straight line from what you're doing to what the culture you're building, great. And then what do we do? I personally believe a lot of and I've heard from a lot of people in the various communities, a lot of the charities since COVID aren't seeing the type of influx that they've gotten from their offices, helping them in their activities. And that's because a lot of people are not even wanting to go into the office, for us going to a charitable situation and help out. And so I think if you can find a way to go and help those teams that were before COVID, got a lot of help. They got a lot of help with, beach cleanups and food distribution and, sorting of clothes or Build-A-Bear, whatever it was that was being helped. Those groups relied on pre-COVID that help, and they are desperate for that type of help. Again, it's a very long answer, but hopefully I helped to answer that question.
Nice. I had a couple thoughts too. And again, just drawing inspiration from clients of ours that have sort of like had similar questions. When you're out to market looking at vendors for various, things or tools that your company needs, think about, does that vendor have a social purpose? Does their, do their purpose and values align with our values? Do they have sort of like charitable components built in, to how they operate? So the mere fact that we're working together will further sort of like propagate charitable donations. So just food for thought. And then, trying to tie it back to recognition. If you do have a charity or charities of choice, I think it can be helpful to give your people the ability and option to redeem any rewards with that charity. So like rather than redeeming their reward for a thing, they can actually make the donation instead. So a lot of our clients do that, and they see great success with those programs. And again, it just like allows their people to sort of further support the charities that are important to the organization. So a couple other ideas. Cool. Quake's keeping one eye on the clock here. There is one other question, so let's tackle it. Not points, but that's cool. This is from Kim. How do we ensure our recognition program is reinforcing our culture and values?
Okay. 1 second. I'm trying to find my notes on it because I have notes on the question. How do we ensure that our recognition program is reinforcing our culture and our values? Everyone, I'm assuming you've already defined your culture and your values. So great, because you've already done that. A lot of people don't do that well, right? Number two, for a recognition program, a lot of the program and platforms out there will actually, you can set it up where you are asked to connect whatever the activity is to the value, to the culture of the value that you are recognizing. And if you're not taking advantage of that feature in whatever platform you're using, it's definitely a good way to ensure that we're not recognizing anything, but we are funneling our activity there. And then there are lots of, there are lots of smart technology ways where in terms of what message is going up, what's branded on the little card that you get. There are lots of ways to do that. So definitely make sure you're taking advantage of the tools you have in front of you. The other one I think is as you recognize and talk about these achievements, that you're not just talking about what happened, that you are actually drawing from the value that you're trying to reinforce, right? So if learning is the activity that is the value you're trying to reinforce, that you're actually referring to the learning portion of it, and you're saying that, yeah, this is one of our values, and don't be ashamed to say it, right? This demonstrates one of our core values, team. We want you guys in the learning habit, right? And so I think as you design your programs, ensuring that the values you want recognized are in your platforms and tools is big. And then as you're talking about your recognition activity, talk about it through the lens of your values.
Yeah, I totally agree. And just a couple things I might add on. I would ask, is there a way to capture data around when and why people are being recognized? So to Kwesi's point, are you tying recognition back to those values? And if so, we got to make sure that we're capturing data around that. And then the other piece is periodically reviewing the data. So that way you can sort of like better understand which values are being lived and which values aren't, or maybe it's not absolute, but some values just may not be lived as often. And then for the values that need improvement, maybe, think about how you can sort of like encourage people to live those values more often. Yeah. So the data portion is very important, I'd say as well.
Joe, and I think you shouldn't be shy to if you've got values that are not being recognized often, but they're actually hindering your company. Let's just say teamwork is up there, but you're not seeing teamwork happening. Then don't be shy to make that more pronounced. Whether that's in what you're talking about, whether that's in what you're asking your leaders to do in your emails to your leaders, whether that's just in the point values, or which we're not doing the points, but in the value of what you're asking rewarding for, right? Like make it. Move it to the top of the list. But I think these programs are really well suited to helping to build those values that you want built, and they don't have to always be equal. You can flex one more than the other.
Yeah, totally. I like it, Grace. Good suggestions. Cool. Well, look at us, 2 minutes to the half hour. Those are all the questions. I've been trying to jot down a few takeaways here just before we sign off. Yeah.
I want to ask a question before we have 2 minutes, but not points programs. So what do you do instead?
Yeah. So again, I'm going to draw inspiration from the clients that we've seen, companies out in the market that have tried points and tried other things, and the programs that are most successful. They are empowering leaders and managers with tools to reward and recognize their direct reports in real time when those direct reports exemplify a value. They're investing meaningful budgets into that program so that like true appreciation is shown for those team members. And then companies that have the tech stack and the environment to run peer-to-peer program, run a non-monetary peer-to-peer recognition program, give people tools to recognize each other in real time. Don't stifle it with limited budgets. Just let people go. And then there are ways that you can build rewards into that program. So looking at leaderboards, for example, and seeing the people who have been the most engaged in giving and receiving recognition, let's call it every week or every month, you can then go ahead and reward those people. Though that program is extremely impactful. So really invest in a top-down program with meaningful budgets tied to your values, non-monetary recognition, peer-to-peer programs, and thinking about ways that we build monetary rewards in for the people who are most engaged.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I agree.
Nice. Cool. Well, we're right on the half hour. I've been jotting down a few takeaways here. Feel free to chime in if you have anything extra, but a couple takeaways from our conversation. Points recognition programs can work in industries where everyone is at a desk or at a computer. Points recognition programs are very difficult to run in frontline and deskless industries. And then, another key takeaway, get your top-down recognition program working before rolling out a peer-to-peer recognition program. Any other
Awesome.
Any other thoughts or key takeaways for you?
For me, the more that you can tie your programs into the values and
I'll translate because I think Kwesi's maybe tie your recognition program to your values and capture data around whether people are living your values or not living your values, and use that data to help you improve. And that is it for us. Thank you so much. And we will see you next week. If you want more great content, you can head over to our YouTube channel. We've got some great stuff there. And otherwise, ciao for now.